Within the framework of authentic pedagogy and the idea that we're in a different world, a changing world where learners are active mini-makers, what does that do? What does it mean for the teacher, the classroom and the students? Importantly for us, we are now beginning to see the teacher as a professional. The teacher makes choices, and these choices have to be purposeful. They're not just because somebody provided a list of topic areas or a list of activities that were deemed necessary as part of a canon or a standard. It really was purposeful in terms of where the learner was and how you would take the learner to another purpose and another goal. And it involved not only the children's or the learner's knowledge, skills and sensibilities, the teacher's knowledge, skills and sensibilities mattered too. What did they know? What did the kids know? What skills did the teachers have? What skills did the learners have? What sensibilities did the teachers have in terms of understanding their kids and their feelings? And how did the learners themselves, what sensibilities did they bring to literacy or to the subject matter?
What I want to do now is look in a rather analytical kind of way around what these differences are and what authentic pedagogy means specifically for the learning of literacy. So the contents of literacy knowledge, instead of learning abstract things like sound letter relationships, which are just abstract till they have a meaning, instead of learning grammar, which is just abstract rules, that we focus on authentic meanings, things you really want to read and things you really want to write. How do we organise the literacy curriculum? Well, I'm going to talk about some examples of that around what we call process pedagogy and natural language growth. And then when the students do literacy, they do active learning, and it's experiential and it's very immersive. And the social relationships of literacy learning are around self-expression. It's a very learner-centred kind of pedagogy. Here in this image here, we've got an example of what you would call analytic phonics. So what you've got here is you've got a story, which is illustrated. You've got some words, and in fact, through this book, which, by the way, is a Dick and Jane reader, a very famous American reading series, which is illustrative of this approach to phonics. There's no explicit teaching of the relationship between sounds and letters, and there's a series of pictures with words and a lot of repetition through the book. So the word father appears a lot, the word funny appears a lot, the word play appears a lot, the word can appears a lot. It appears in a very repetitive kind of way, and it's about learning whole sight words, and that's assisted by the illustrations. So it's a meaningful page. Look, there's a family, there's something happening, we're looking at it. So it's meant to be meaningful in a way that the other approach was not. And that what we then do is something called analytic phonics. We can take the word can apart and call it k-a-n, or play, P-L-A-Y, is play, right? So what we're doing is we're starting with a whole meaning, and we're analysing how the components of that meaning are made. But in fact, the truth is, in this kind of approach, it's really it's about learning sight words. It's about learning to see a whole word and know what that whole word means, less than it is about putting together the components of that word from the component out. So it's, if you like, it's the opposite approach, and it's an approach focused on the meaning of the written text as a meaningful story. So that was a very concrete example around learning phonics, two different approaches to learning phonics. I want to give a couple of other examples at the moment now as well. So instead of learning grammatical rules and focusing on sentences, what we do is we focus in an approach to writing called process writing. We focus on the actually very social business of writing. So we do a draft, we get feedback on that perhaps, we revise it, and then we produce a meaningful text which we perhaps publish into our, into our school class workbook. Perhaps the whole class writes pieces, perhaps it goes up on the wall, and so on. So this is called a process approach to writing, and rather than focus on rules, what we do every day is we just do a lot of writing. We write about things we want to write about, your holidays or something you're interested in, and every now and then you're going to come up against a word that you don't know how to spell. Well, you look that up in the dictionary, or perhaps you add it to a list of spelling words. So rather than just learn spelling off by heart, which is what you do in sort of classic phonics pedagogy, learn a whole list of spelling words, pass the test. It's the spelling that you encounter in the process of writing where you gradually become a better speller. Not a focus on rules, but a focus on immersion in the practice of writing. Also, going one step even beyond the Dick and Jane reader, in that context, everybody was reading the same reader, presumably on the same page at the same kind of time, that what we have now is self-directed reading, where you choose a book you're interested in and you read it, and it's by immersion in reading that you become a better reader. Let's not worry about the rules too much, because immersion means it'll become obvious after a period of time. The other aspect of this kind of approach to literacy, or the other key phrase that's often used, is whole language. So if grammar and phonics rules were about decomposing language in little bits and learning all the rules about the little bits, whole language is this idea that in our reading and writing, language is a whole complex thing. We immerse ourselves in the wholeness of language, and therefore we become better at it by immersion. Now, in fact, the analogy that's used for writing and reading is an analogy with oral language. Now, we actually don't learn oral language in a very explicit way. We're, as very young babies, we're immersed in this world of spoken language, and it's not explicitly taught. Certainly not explicitly taught in the way that literacy and is taught in schools, and certainly not the way in which it's taught in didactic pedagogy, which is very explicitly, and it's sort of in the whole language point, from the whole language point of view, it's unnatural. It's very didactic kind of space. Well, so what the whole language people advocate is, well, look, let's learn to read and write in much the same way that we learn to speak. Now, in fact, it's a bit more complicated than that. There's less time for reading and writing. Like, it's not as if the school runs for your every waking hour. It's only a limited amount of space. There's a fair bit of diversity in the classroom, so how can you all be learning the same thing at the same pace in the same way? So the idea around whole language is let's immerse ourselves and pick up language, but in fact, sometimes explicitly explaining the rules is a shortcut to learning something, rather than just immersing in something and figuring it out for yourself. That's often a slow and inefficient way to learn. So there's a lot of critiques of whole language and process writing as well. So on the one hand, it's a powerful approach because it's about interest, engagement, relevance, motivation. But on the other hand, is that at the expense of thinking explicitly about how language works, what the structure of language is? And would that sometimes be a shortcut to learning?